The opinions and statements expressed in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of WWDB, its staff, or management.
Entrepreneur, author, and financial consultant Marc Bernstein helps high-performing entrepreneurial business owners create a vision for the future and follow through on their goals and intentions. Ang Honorato is a business growth strategist who blends psychology and business together to create conscious leaders and business owners who impact the world. Founders Forum is a radio show podcast sharing the real stories behind entrepreneurship as founders discover more about themselves while providing valuable lessons and some fun and entertainment for you. Now, here's Marc and Ang.
Good morning, Philadelphia. Good morning, America. Good morning, world, wherever you are, wherever you're listening from, at whatever time, and maybe it's good evening. Whatever it is, great. And by the way, we just on live radio, we just had a St. Jude public service announcement, and Ange and I smiled at each other. It's one of my favorite charities. In fact, I'm playing in their golf outing next Monday. Just looking out the window, we've got a very hazy day in Philadelphia today. So like a lot of the country, for the first time, we are experiencing haze from fires from far away, in this case, Canada. Ange and I are both in a mode of not listening to a lot of news. Sometimes it's good to tune that out. So I didn't know what was going on when I drove home yesterday, but I saw this beautiful red sun against a gray sky, took a picture, showed it to Ange, and it was amazing. And then I got home and I realized why it was like that. It was because of that haze. It was a pretty crazy time. It's a hazy day. So as entrepreneurs, we face obstacles every day, and we faced a little one today in that there was a scheduling snafu with our scheduled guest. So we're switching gears real quickly to something that we had on the back burner that we were saving for a day like this, which is I'm going to interview Ang Honorato, entrepreneur, and she's going to interview Marc Bernstein, entrepreneur. And that's going to be our show today. And I'll just give you a little disclaimer first. We don't really promote our own businesses on the show. That's not our purpose. Our purpose is to hear the visions of founders and understand their stories and how they got to where they are, whether they're in for-profit business, and we have some nonprofit leaders as well. And it's not really to promote what we do, but we may not be able to help it today when we tell our stories because we're entrepreneurs. So it's my disclaimer for that as we go. So starting with that, Ange, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. I guess it's not true that it's always sunny in Philadelphia, right? We definitely do have, and to your point, Marc, I've been trying to be on a news detox for the last year or so, and had no idea that it wasn't just a hazy early summer day, that we were dealing with some weather event or some fire event. So, but no, glad that we have this opportunity to kind of sit down and move our seats from sitting next to each other to across the table and kind of having a conversation that, takes us a little bit deeper, but helps our audience get to know us and the show a little bit deeper as well.
By the way, it was almost a purple haze, so I began to know what Jimi Hendrix was talking about way back. So, Ange, tell us a little bit about what you do. We say it in the promo for the show, but I'm most interested in telling your story in terms of how you got to the point of what you're doing today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I say that, as a business growth and human capital consultant and strategist who've been doing it almost, unbelievably 30 years almost at this point, 28 or something like that. But I really do try to look at everything I do as a blend of sort of the personal and the psychology and personal development into business, right? Because I think it's, number one, it's important. We're all humans behind the work, whatever it is, the work that we do. And I also think it's really important in today's environment because we're in a generation where this isn't a case where, we come in and leave the personal stuff at the door, come in, do your work for 8 hours, and then go home and put a different hat on, right? So today, life is work, work is life, things are blended. And I think it's important to be able to have that lens, right? To kind of talk about the psychology behind individuals and how does that affect the business. And also from a business standpoint, I work with people, and both from an executive search standpoint, where I help find executives and place them in the right roles. And then when they're in those roles, help companies understand how do you drive the business in a way that you're making an impact, you're caring for your stakeholders, whether they be internal employees, whether they be your clients, or whether they be the community at large, right? And really operationalizing that and paying attention to those things. And, over the years, it's taken on many different forms. I was purely in sort of a recruitment, phase for a number of years, and then kind of expanded that out into business operations and helping companies form and run and performance management and operational excellence. And now today it's really kind of combining all of those things in a way where, a passion of mine is really bringing this concept of conscious leadership into the everyday vernacular, and really even taking that a step further, looking at the space that we're in today and saying, we need to really be almost trauma informed and conscious. And that's from a corporate standpoint as well as an individual standpoint. So there's a lot of words in there to say a lot of things I do. Some of it's pretty esoteric, but at the end of the day, it's, I love working with people behind the business and then helping businesses run more effectively.
By the way, interesting, because in my business, the financial field, I was talking to somebody we should discuss in the last week or two who specializes in financial trauma, which is a thing. When I tell my story, I had a little bit of financial trauma when I was in high school that I think influenced ultimately a lot of what I do today. So I'm interested in, Ange, the psychology and business together. My wife's a psychologist, and I know there were things in her life that influenced her to want to go into therapy and become a therapist, et cetera. What happened in your life, that you want to talk about that influenced you to go on that path?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And, I always tell this story, and it sounds kind of funny, and maybe makes me sound even dated at this point. But I remember being about 13 and sitting in my room studying one day for school or something, and kept getting these messages, what I would probably today refer to as almost like a download or a sense of knowing that I was meant to be, first of all, I should say both my parents are in the education field. My mother was a teacher, my dad was a superintendent, and other family members were entrepreneurs. But I had more of a connection to sort of the helping professions, right? So it wasn't really a corporate mindset that I ever had. And when I was a preteen or something, I got this kind of messaging that I love to talk, obviously, and I love to be around people, and I kind of just found myself.
You like to talk?
I like to talk, and who knew I'd end up on podcasts one day? Maybe it wasn't even a thing back then, but who knew? But I kind of did know. I got this thing where I wanted to be, and it sounds really funny now, but I wanted to be Oprah's next Dr. Phil. So if you think Oprah discovered Dr. Phil, gave him a platform, and he became America's psychologist, not doing one-on-one psychology per se, but being, on stages and really affecting the masses. And I think that also born out of a lot of personal struggles I was going in. And from the time I was about 10, I did battle and struggle with an eating disorder, and I went about 10 years without it being diagnosed, and then went into a pretty intensive program, and came out of that and just thought, I need to be in a space of not just helping people, but understanding what are some of the things that make us have these kind of struggles, right? And so the goal was to go to school and become a psychologist, and went to Rutgers and had an opportunity in between graduating from undergrad, was working part-time in a corporate office. A very storied 150-year-old German company was opening up doors in the U.S., and so I did sales and marketing for them part-time and started working there, as a full-time job before I even graduated, and something clicked in business. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. There's so many new things and whatever. And so from there, I ended up not going back to PhD school and kind of went down the corporate road, fell into recruiting, and found that to be the perfect marriage of, using psychology and assessment and working deeply with people, but finding this natural way of matchmaking them into an environment, which was a job that would affect them, their families, the businesses. And then around, after 9/11 happened, I got that itch again. I'm like, I want to continue my education. So instead of PhD school, for example, directly that, I went back and got a degree in what we called social sciences and behavioral assessment, and was trained as a clinical therapist, but knew I didn't want to hang a shingle. I wanted to kind of really deepen my knowledge and be able to bring that into my corporate work. And so for a number of years, that's where I kind of married that, business sense and operations and executive search into a broader level, right? And so what started out as me having my own personal struggles and having that orientation of a helping profession, but finding a way to bring in concepts and things that at the time I don't think were, yes, there's IO psychologists, industrial organizational psychologists, and all of that. And there's a lot of personal development and there's training programs, but the idea of really talking to people about what drives them, what makes them do what they do, and that does affect their work, right? So that's kind of where it got me today, and why the conscious leadership thing is a term now, I think, that's wrapping all of this up in a nice bow of what I've done the last 25, 30 years.
Can you identify one, we ask this question to a lot of our guests, one success that you had, perhaps a business story that, sort of catapulted you to the next level? Do you have anything like that?
Yeah. So, I think as a result of 9/11 happening, and I had relocated to Philadelphia for personal reasons, and while every other company in the nation was, not hiring and laying off, particularly in the white collar space where I was in executive search, I found a company out here that was actually really hiring because of new projects they were going on. And it was also, it was a whole new market offering. And so we were, as I say, kind of building the bridge while we're standing on it. And there was a part of me, and you go back to the psychology, where I didn't feel that I had the skills yet to really step into managing a number of people. But I kind of allowed myself to raise my hand, put myself in the right positions. And within a matter of a year and a half, with having no previous management experience, I had about 40 people reporting to me. And telling myself my whole life I'm a psychology-minded person, I don't do math and finance, to having to run a $3 million P&L and having to figure that out, right? So it was just stepping into the unknown and building a support system around me. And, we were a young, hungry company with a lot of young, leaders that are still good friends of mine today, and they're all doing amazing things. So I think the success was just taking the leap and jumping in a time frame where, as a country, we didn't even know what was going on, right?
Right. So that's a great one. How about, can you think of any particular, I hate to use the word, but failure, because, failures are steps on the way to success. But can you think of anything where it was a real struggle that you ran across that you learned, maybe even more than that you learned from the success?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, ironically, as much as I'm, on the people and in the people business, and psychology and development and communication is a big thing for me. One of my biggest hurdles at one point was on the people side. I had some senior leader, a particular senior leader that was in charge of a number of things, and it was a big job that I had. I was brought in to run all of operations for a search firm, and there was definitely a personality conflict and major issues. And normally, I didn't handle them very well. I either cowered down, I kind of walked away from it, I walked around it, and found myself one day realizing that this is on me. If I'm the leader, I need to find a way to take this very difficult, challenging person and allow myself to learn how to have very courageous conversations. And that was my own personal development, because it's something that was my own, I don't want to call it a weakness, what I now know, that was my own minimum standard. It was my own self-imposed glass ceiling that I was too afraid that I didn't have the right skill sets. And sat down one day and said, you know what, let's have a conversation, human to human, heart to heart. Let me understand what's making this so uncomfortable for you. Why are you so unhappy here? And why are these things a stumbling block? And it worked out so well that she'd been in business for like 35 years at that point. And I got to really understand what was going on with her and the pressures behind the work and in her home and in her personal life. And she had a disabled son that was in his 20s, and he was not doing well. And she was the primary breadwinner, and just all kinds of things. And understanding and having that human-to-human contact completely changed the game, changed her, changed me, changed the whole dynamic of the whole business and the whole team. So it was a failure at first. It turned into one of my greatest successes.
That's great. So I imagine that your background as a psychologist and as a counselor helped you from that perspective, but maybe you just didn't know you had it there in the business world, and you had to connect with that part of your brain.
Yeah.
Too.
Well, I think the other important thing too, Mark, and you hear this a lot, the helping professions. A lot of times we go into helping professions because we're trying to avoid what we don't want to deal with in ourselves, right? It's so much easier to...
Or it's a way to deal with it. That's the other side.
Right, almost unconsciously to... Yeah. And I think that's what's happening to me now. I think what's happening to people in all kinds of businesses is we need to become more conscious, and we need to do our own internal shadow work, because that's how we become better people, leaders, family members, business owners, entrepreneurs. It's about not running away, but diving into those those deeper issues.
Well, interesting you say that, because I've been thinking about this. I know some people, as you do, in the woo-woo world, like spiritual healers and people like that, that have been predicting a shift for a long time. And they kept saying, it's happening this year, it's happening this year. But, shifts don't happen like that. They happen over time. But it occurs to me now in hindsight, the pandemic really was a turning point. And it seems like there's an awakening, for lack of a better word, all over the place, that people are waking up to what it is, how they want to live their lives, what they really want to do with their lives, how they want their relationships to be. It's a very interesting and I think opportunistic time, and it's time for a break.
Establishing a self-directed Roth IRA or other self-directed retirement plan offers access to investment options usually only available to well-connected or wealthy individuals. Anyone can build wealth and achieve tax-free income for life and financial freedom without the inordinate risk of speculative investing, securities trading, exotic financial instruments, or hoping for the best from the stock market. Since their start in 2003, Camaplan has come to be synonymous with expertise, flexibility, responsiveness, and diversity in investment choices. They provide innovative investment opportunities for investors seeking direct control and more choices in how they deploy their investment capital. Camaplan doesn't just make it possible to invest in alternative assets, they also teach investors how to put their money to work. Take the road to financial freedom today. Go to camaplan.com/IRA.
Here we are again on Founders Forum, and now it's time to turn the tables. So I'll turn it over to Ange.
Yeah, so Mark, first of all, I just want to say this is fun. This is really fun. I love having guests in the studio, but being able to, as we were talking offline, kind of free form and flow and really kind of, I think sometimes we all get lost in the why do we do what we do, right? So with that, I think that's a great starting point. I know that we were also talking off air. I know that, your background, you love sports, you love music, you've done a lot of different things, but let us understand, the story of Mark, how did sitting in this seat today, what are some of the key factors and what were some of the inspirations that led you to go down the path that you have?
Well, so I was much more of a music guy than a sports guy, especially as a kid. Sports is more a later interest to a certain extent, but was always creative. I went to art school when I was a kid until I realized, and I quit when I realized about 11 years old when all the kids were playing football on Saturdays and I was in art school, that I needed to get out more a little bit, I think. But I, I was always artistically oriented. I ended up going to school for music. I have a degree in music, in composition. And I knew that was not necessarily going to be a career. I didn't, I didn't intend to teach music. And somewhere around when I was in at the University of Delaware in an English literature class, I remember being inspired because everyone always told me I should be a lawyer because I argued well. It was another way of saying you're argumentative. So I always thought about that in the back of my mind, and it occurred to me that there must be lawyers who represent musicians, and I didn't know about it. I didn't know there were entertainment lawyers. I didn't know anything about it. Started looking into it, and I decided that was going to be my career path, and it was for a little bit. But so I ended up going to law school, and with the idea of becoming an entertainment lawyer. So I went to the Ohio State University College of Law, and I ended up visiting NYU in the last year because they had entertainment law and copyright courses, and because I was in New York, and there's a lot of music going on at that time in New York, it still is. And I pursued that path. And it was an interesting, you were referencing, we were talking before, and you referenced it obtusely a little bit, the left brain, right brain connection, music and math, music. I actually think they're very closely connected. And I practiced law. I discovered I didn't really love the music industry as much as I thought I would. I love music. I still do. I'm still active in it, but I didn't I didn't really love what I saw of the business at that time. It was a particularly stressful time for the business. And I started thinking about what I was going to do next. And I have a brother who was in the life insurance industry, and the life insurance industry was sort of pioneering the new financial planning industry. And when I heard financial planner, that just resonated with me because as a lawyer, I felt I wanted to help other people. You know, I had a similar thing to you where I wanted to be in a helping profession. But the experience I had as a lawyer, I didn't really seem to be doing that. I seemed to be talking to other lawyers all day long, negotiating. I'd done all kinds of different legal work, some litigation while I was becoming that entertainment lawyer. And I felt like, you know, to a certain extent, you're trained to gum up the works a little bit to create billing sometimes in the legal industry. Of course, not all lawyers are like that, but it's there, and it didn't resonate with me. And when I heard about this field, I thought, wow, that's what I really wanted to be. So I interviewed with this company that they were interviewing attorneys to become financial planners, and they would not hire me. I failed the test because it was a marketing test, and they wanted me now at my age with all my connections. They didn't want me at 29 years old with no connections, basically, which is what I had then. So I took a wayward path. I won't go through the whole thing now, pursuing that, and eventually worked for a regional firm where I helped create the financial planning initiative, going from a product sales organization into a process. And my thing has always been, I want to have the process of understanding what people want for their lives, and that's the only thing that should influence what they end up doing in terms of ultimately the investments they buy or the whatever products they buy or however they create their financial plan. The other things should come first. So fast forward many years, I've written a book, as you know, called The Fiscal Therapy Solution, and I really think of what we do as a form of therapy. And what our goal is, and we've created a new company called March, and I have five partners that we're all aligned in terms of doing what's best for the client based on what it is they really want. And the foundation of that is being able to get deep with people and not really understanding them, like a little bit like we're doing today. We're scratching the surface today, understanding who somebody is, what drives them. Especially our clients are primarily entrepreneurs. They're almost all business owners, and most of them, I would say, are founders of companies, and which is why I'm so interested in doing the show. But because they're founders and entrepreneurs, they can pretty much do what they want. You know, they can pretty much go in the directions they want to do. And we help them think that through, or what they want, because it's surprising how many people have businesses and they're running on automatic, but they really haven't thought about necessarily their exit strategy or what comes next in life. I talk in the book about, do you really want to retire, or do you want to aspire, or do you want to refire, or do you want to, what is it you want to do going forward? But I find most people, when their business is their whole life, they're not just going to stop and just, retire and play golf and go to Florida and that's the end of the story. Some do, but most of the people I work with tend to not want to do that. Another thing that I'll just mention real quickly that influenced me, that was my financial trauma, I guess, was, we were talking about fires today, and it was a fire. My father, and it's in the book, at the early part of the book, I was a senior in high school, and we found out that his business was on fire. It was in a building that arson was set to another business in the building, spread throughout the building. He was in the greeting card business, so what wasn't destroyed by fire was destroyed by water and smoke. So since it's a smoky day today, we're talking about that. And, it changed my thoughts about where I was going to college the next year. It changed my thoughts about what I want to do. And I never thought consciously about it till much later. But I realized the idea, and the part of the story that really influenced me was he was really upset that he hadn't renewed his insurance, and he was underinsured. And he really had to, and he almost left the business and took a job, went out, was going to move to Kansas City to take a job. That's where some of the major greeting card companies are. And really thought about it and then said, nope, I'm not doing that. He never really worked for anybody for any length of time in his life, always worked for himself, and had to triple the size of the business just to afford his new rent and all the stuff that he had to do. So I think the protection element, which is one of the bases of financial planning, I think I started on that side of the business partly because of that experience, but I never really connected that together till much later. So we've become what we call financial advocates for financial responsibility, making sure you want to do all these things, but make sure what you have is protected, preserve your wealth, manage your wealth, and create your legacy that you'd like to do. And that's pretty much my story, and that's where we are today.
Yeah, it's we have so many commonalities, Mark, but it's interesting and sad as well. But I also have a connection and a personal story to a fire. My house burned down, and in my late 20s, and it's like your worst fear. I pulled up to it, and the whole neighborhood was there, and all of that, and you don't realize how you just get in survival mode and you just move forward. But same thing, I found out many years later that affected me. My fear of losing money also translated into I'm afraid to make too much because what if I lose too much? Right. So these are the psychology things that kind of get tied in together. So fascinating stories, and I'm really glad we had the chance to deal with our scheduling snafu today. This was fun.
By the way, on psychology, we have another minute or so left. There's a great book out there, The Psychology of Money. I'm forgetting the author's name right now. But it was actually recommended to me by a client who, when we got into his story, and he's been extremely, extremely successful, has more than money he can manage. But I said, what kind of things keep you up at night? And he said, well, it bothers me that I don't like to order the sides in restaurants. I don't like to pay $11 for asparagus or whatever it is. And we went on and we joke a lot about it, but it was a real thing. He now orders the sides because we've talked it through a lot. But you never know what's on people's minds and what's influenced them, and it has to do with how they grew up and the imprints that they have and all those kind of things. So.
Yeah. Well, on that note, one last plug for another great book called The Illusion of Money by Kyle Cease. Speaks exactly to that, the relationship with money. So hopefully folks will check it out.
Well, I enjoyed telling you my story. I more enjoyed hearing your story. And next week we'll resume with another one of our founders. We've got some exciting guests coming up. And hope you all enjoy this hazy day if you're listening live. And wherever you are, I hope you're having a wonderful, beautiful day and a great tomorrow.
We hope you enjoyed your time with Founders Forum today and you found value to take with you throughout your day. Join us again next week for another episode of Founders Forum on WWDB Talk Radio and always at the Founders Forum show page at www.dbam.com.